Every single day, people lose opportunities not because they lack talent, ambition, or intelligence, but because they delay. Procrastination isn't just a bad habit, it's a silent thief. It steals time, momentum, and dreams. And the truth is, every moment we wait is a moment we never get back. Today isn't about learning why we procrastinate. Today is about deciding that enough is enough. This is the moment we stop negotiating with excuses and start taking command of our lives. Because your future isn't built someday, it's built now. The truth is, men don't follow tasks, they follow purpose. When a man wakes up each day staring at a to-do list, he sees obligations, pressure, and expectation. But when he wakes up connected to an inner fire, he sees direction. Most procrastination in men doesn't come from laziness. It comes from feeling disconnected from what truly matters to them. A man moves with power when he believes his actions define who he is becoming, not just what he is doing. Women often notice this long before men do. They see that when a man has purpose, his presence changes, his posture, his tone, his decisiveness. They can feel when he's driven from within or when he's simply reacting to demands from a woman's perspective. A man anchored in purpose becomes more reliable, more intentional, and more emotionally available because his actions come from alignment, not pressure. And when he drifts, they can see how quickly procrastination becomes a shield he hides behind. Men, on the other hand, often mistake their hesitation for needing more planning, more readiness, or more time. But what they truly need is ignition, something that reminds them who they are and why their effort matters. When a man starts with that inner fire, every task becomes an expression of identity rather than an item to check off, and procrastination loses its power. Most men don't change when they're comfortable. They change when the cost of staying the same becomes too heavy to carry. Procrastination survives because it feels safe in the moment, but what men rarely acknowledge is the long-term price they quietly pay. Every delayed decision, every postponed action, every avoided responsibility creates a debt that doesn't disappear. It compounds, and what looks like hesitation on the surface is often fear disguised as logic, slowly eroding confidence and momentum. Women often see this cost in a way men sometimes can't or won't. They watch how delayed action turns into emotional distance, lost opportunities, or a slow decline in self-respect. From a woman's perspective, a man's inaction doesn't just stall his progress, it dims his presence. She can sense when he's avoiding something important, because the energy he withholds from his goals often becomes the energy he withdraws from the relationship. What he postpones externally, she feels internally. Men, however, tend to make delay feel reasonable, convincing themselves that waiting is strategic or that timing will eventually become perfect. But the moment a man measures what his inaction is truly costing him, respect, confidence, momentum, connection, delay becomes uncomfortable. And discomfort becomes the catalyst that pulls him forward when motivation fails. Progress becomes possible. The moment a man stops trying to conquer the whole mountain and focuses on taking the first step he cannot say no to. Men often procrastinate not because the goal is unworthy, but because the first move feels too big, too uncertain, or too demanding. When the starting line feels overwhelming, the mind instinctively retreats. But when the first step is shrunk into something simple, something a man can do in under 2 minutes, the resistance dissolves. The momentum he gains from that tiny action becomes the spark that turns hesitation into movement. Women often understand this dynamic intuitively, watching how men place pressure on themselves to deliver the full outcome rather than begin the process. From a woman's perspective, a man doesn't need to accomplish everything at once to show strength. He needs to demonstrate that he's willing to begin. She sees how his confidence rises when he takes even the smallest action, and how quickly it fades when he keeps waiting for the perfect moment. What she wants isn't perfection, it's progress. Men, however, tend to believe that their first step must be impressive, meaningful, or immediately productive. But when a man shrinks that first step into something effortless, he bypasses the internal resistance that fuels procrastination. Once he starts, even imperfectly, the mind shifts from avoidance to engagement, and momentum takes over where motivation once failed. Most men rely on willpower like it's a renewable resource, only to discover it collapses the moment stress, fatigue, or uncertainty appear. Willpower drags a man forward because it demands constant effort, And when effort becomes the only fuel, procrastination eventually wins. What actually transforms a man's consistency isn't intensity. It's structure. Systems eliminate the emotional debate in his head and replace it with predictable, repeatable actions that move him forward, even on days he doesn't feel motivated. A man anchored in systems doesn't fight himself. He follows a rhythm that carries him. Women often recognize the difference between a man who depends on willpower and one who relies on systems. From a woman's perspective, a man without structure swings between bursts of ambition and periods of avoidance, which creates uncertainty in his presence and reliability. She can sense when he's improvising his life day by day, and she can feel the stability when he builds routines that support his goals. What she responds to most isn't his effort, but his consistency, because consistency is what makes her trust his direction. Men, however, often see systems as restrictions rather than tools for freedom. They worry routines limit their spontaneity or make them rigid. But the opposite is true. Systems free the mind from decision fatigue, remove friction from productivity, and create automatic momentum. When a man designs an environment that supports his goals, the path becomes smoother, the resistance weaker, and progress becomes the default instead of the exception. Most men chase motivation the way some people chase lightning, hoping it strikes at the right moment, only to be disappointed when it doesn't appear. Motivation is emotional fuel, and emotions shift with stress, distraction, and uncertainty. What actually creates discipline is not a burst of energy, but a deep personal meaning that anchors a man's behavior. When a man knows exactly why something matters to him, procrastination loses its power, because the action becomes connected to his identity rather than his mood. Meaning turns effort into purpose, and purpose turns discipline into a natural response. Women often notice this difference in a man long before he does. From a woman's perspective, a man who understands his why carries a different presence, more grounded, more intentional, more directed. She can sense when he moves with clarity rather than impulse, and that clarity creates safety and respect. A man without meaning tends to drift, hesitate, or distract himself, and she feels the ripple effects of that uncertainty. But when his actions align with a deeper purpose, she experiences him as decisive, consistent, and emotionally available because he isn't driven by fleeting feelings. Men, however, are often taught to look for motivation instead of meaning. They wait to feel ready, inspired, or energized before taking action, not realizing that readiness follows action, not the other way around. But when a man roots his discipline in meaning, whether it's for his family, his future, his integrity, or his potential, he no longer negotiates with himself. The why becomes the compass that directs him and the engine that moves him, making discipline not a struggle but a natural expression of who he's committed to becoming. Most men wait for a moment of certainty that never arrives, believing clarity must come before action, when in reality, clarity is the reward for moving, not the prerequisite. Men are often conditioned to think they need the perfect plan, the perfect timing, or the perfect level of confidence before making a move. But hesitation disguised as preparation is still hesitation. Action, any action, cuts through confusion and reveals what works, what doesn't, and what direction to take next. A man who acts even imperfectly gains more insight in a week than a man who waits for months trying to think his way into certainty. Women often see this pattern unfold with striking clarity. From a woman's perspective, a man who constantly waits feels distant, stalled, or disengaged, not because he doesn't care, but because he's trapped in the belief that readiness must come first. She can sense when he's holding back from his potential, his responsibilities, or his growth, and she often feels the emotional impact of his hesitation. When he acts, however, even in small ways, she feels his energy shift. His confidence rises, his intention sharpens, and his presence becomes more assertive and grounded. Action doesn't just create results. It restores the qualities she respects most in him. Men, however, are often taught that making a move without certainty is reckless, when in truth certainty is built through movement. Overthinking becomes a shield that protects them from discomfort, but also keeps them from progress. The moment a man takes action, he interrupts the cycle of doubt and replaces it with experience. That experience reveals what he cares about, what he must adjust, and what direction he must take. Confidence is not something men are meant to have before they begin. It is something they earn by showing themselves they are capable of moving forward despite uncertainty. When a man chooses action over hesitation, he discovers that clarity naturally rises to meet him, and procrastination loses its grip because it no longer has confusion to hide behind,